Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome in Leicester and across the world. We've given away 340 tickets to 10 nations in the world. So there are a lot of people not doing anything else but watching us this morning. And welcome to everybody. It's a very humbling experience because I had a dream personally about 3 years ago that we might one day have a conference which discusses this rarely discussed topic of disability, hate crime and hostility against people because they are disabled. COVID and other things happened and it didn't work. And now I'm privileged to stand by my dream team of Irene and Leah, and with their energy and my looks, we've put together this conference. Thanks for that. In fact, my wife has sent me a good luck card this morning, and she said, sending you positive vibes, don't stop believing, and don't tell too many jokes. I don't know, some chance. I'm honoured to be amongst you this morning, and so many generous and lovely people have helped to set up this conference, and I'll go through an embarrassing list of thank yous in a moment. In fact, I'll start by saying that this conference is significant, not only because it's the first, and because it's such a rarely discussed topic, but because it's so important, because of the impacts that happen to people that destroy lives and remove people's values and attack people's personal status. So it's important we discuss this topic. And it's important we build bridges between people with disabilities and people without. So this isn't solely an exclusive club for disabled people, but it must encompass everybody so that we can understand and work with each other to develop and move forward. The thank yous to the British Society of Criminology Hate Crime Network for their money, to the University of Leicester for the facilities, for the people, for the cash, for all kinds of different support, for our lovely ambassadors that are helping us today, many of whom are students with us, to our speakers today, experts who are giving up their own time, some of their own knowledge in the passion to forward this subject and make people aware of the problems and what people are doing to solve those problems. So thank you so much to them. You didn't have to be here. I'm sure you had much better things to do. Thank you for attendees here today who have broken through barriers of pain, who have been lifted on the wings of passion to come and be with us today to discuss this important topic. And thank you to my brilliant co-organisers. I'm very, very close to them, staying quite close. So I've got to say thank you, otherwise I'd never get out alive. And thank you to our wonderful arrangers, to Wilma, to Isabel, and to the marvellous Laura, who's hiding outside on the reception desk, without whom this would not happen. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. So important to the cause, I couldn't even see you. Laura, thank you very much. Now, these people have given up so much of their time to make this possible. It would not be possible without this absolute commitment to the project. Would you please help me to thank Laura and colleagues for what they've done? Yeah.
Thank you, David. Disability hate crime is a very timely and important topic. It is also intersectional. We know that disability hate crime intersects with other aspects of identity. On behalf of the British Society of Criminology Hate Crime Network, we are pleased to organize this conference with the support of the British Society of Criminology and the University of Leicester. A few words about the network first. The network was set up in 2018, and for this conference, but also other conferences and events and activities that we organize, the aim is to provide a forum in order to share information about hate crime with a view to developing critical thinking, critical analysis and debate across research, policy and practice. Also to advance understanding of hate crime in the UK, but also globally, especially as we live in a globalized, connected world. Also to foster opportunities for collaboration between hate crime researchers, criminologists more generally, as well as related individuals and groups. And finally, to encourage networking between policymakers, practitioners, academics, but also students researching hate crime. In terms of our activities, our events, we organize conferences. So, for example, in the past, we organized the Misogyny as Hate Crime Conference in 2019, and also the Hate Crime in Football in 2021. Also, we have our online events in terms of researching within hate studies, a discussion for postgraduate and early career researchers organized by Leah, as well as our hate crime series podcast. We actually recorded our first podcast for the network a few weeks ago on transphobic hate crime. Also, we have our BSC Hate Crime Network article prize, which we will be announcing at the University of Surrey, the BSC conference, in 2 weeks' time. And this is sponsored by Palgrave. In terms of membership to the network, this is free and open to anyone with an interest in the field of hate studies. You can follow us on Twitter. You can join the GISC mail list, which provides information about forthcoming events and other news that we have for the network. And you can see the subscription link here. Also very, very exciting, we are recruiting 3 new members for our steering group. So if you are interested in applying, please let me know. We can have an informal chat if you like. If you are interested to apply, you can submit a statement, no more than 300 words to myself, outlining how you can contribute to this role. The deadline for this is the 15th of July. If you would like more information about the network, you can see the website link here. And also, if you would like more information about the British Society of Criminology website, you can see the website here. Finally, if you would like to ask any questions, or if you would like to be involved in any of our events or activities, or if you have any ideas, please get in touch with myself or Rachel. And I just realized that I haven't added our email address on the slide, but you can access that from the network website that you can see on this slide. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Leah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to really quickly speak about what the conference is about. David's already given a lovely inspirational introduction to the conference that I don't think I can match. But we really wanted to bring together a variety of people. So people who have experienced hate crime, academics, organisations, practitioners, people involved with policy. So disability hate crime isn't an issue that only one person or one organisation can fix and solve. So it's really about harnessing that collaborative work and bringing people together. So really about how we can learn from each other to raise awareness and challenge disability hate crime. We've been absolutely just overwhelmed by the response to the conference. So over 300 people booked on, both in person and virtually. We've got a lot of people joining us online, and huge thanks to IT at Leicester who have made that possible. I had no idea how complicated a hybrid event was, and I've not had to be involved with it that much, luckily. But we have lots of people joining us online as well. So this morning, you've got obviously our lovely faces, and then you're going to be joined by Neil, Professor Neil Chakraborty, and then David as well this morning. We're then going to have a bit of a break, and then we're going to be thinking much more about impacts of disability hate crime. And I'm really happy to be on a panel with people that I've worked with before. So people from People First Merseyside and LEAP People First as well, sharing some of the incredible work that they've been doing in the community. We do have lunch, as David said, and we'll give some kind of instructions on how that will work later. This afternoon, we've got Fighting Disability Hate Crime and Intersectional Hate. So we've got a range of speakers. Some of those are going to be recorded speeches that we're going to play out. Others, we've got people joining us. And then we're kicking off with Hope for the Future. So how can we look at, we know what the issues are, we've raised awareness, how can we work together to try and challenge hate crime? So we've got some brilliant speakers with us. No pressure to you all that are sat there, but I'm really, really excited to see what you've got to share with us. I should also say we've got Leicester Safeguarding outside as well, who have got a stand outside where you can get refreshments. So if you go out and grab a coffee, you can see what they've got to offer as well. Is that everything? Okay, so going to welcome the lovely Neil to the stage.
I don't deserve applause. I haven't said or done anything. Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you, guys. That was brilliant. This is great. Thank you so much for coming along. There are so many people registered face-to-face, online. Welcome to sunny Leicester. It doesn't look very sunny in this room, in this basement room, but obviously it's sunny every day in Leicester. It's brilliant to see you. It's just wonderful. This event is really, really complex, and I think your organisers have alluded to that, but they haven't really gone into depth about how complicated it is to organise an event of this scale, of this complexity. Bless you. So hats off to David, Leah, Irene, Laura, Chris doing all the publicity, everybody involved in making this happen. It's a huge event. IT, I should always thank IT, and everybody doing everything. So just a quick round of applause for all of you guys, because you're amazing. Thank you. I'm really excited about today. I think the programme looks amazing, and I think we're all going to feel inspired. I also, if I'm honest, feel a slight sense of frustration as well. This is 2022, and we've had to wait a long time for the first ever major international event dedicated exclusively to disability hate crime. And what have we been doing all these years? Why has it taken us so long? And I look very firmly at myself here and others within this space. We could and should have done a lot more, I think, to give disability hate crime the focus that it deserves. But looking forward, I think we can and will do much more going forward. And I think today's event is a springboard for action. So I'm very excited in that context. My role is quite easy, I think, today. Hopefully, I'm going to set a bit of context. I'm keeping my input deliberately short. I'm going to be drawing from research evidence to talk, bless you, to talk quite generally initially about hate crime and some of the challenges posed by hate crime. And then I want to talk much more specifically about disability hate crime, challenges there, but more importantly, how we can start to respond more effectively to those challenges. I want to start with some interesting images that you can see in front of you there. I could have chosen from a whole other set of images, and I'm sure all of you can think of other images that help to encapsulate the toxicity, the turbulence, the entrenched sense of prejudice and hostility that we see pretty much anywhere and everywhere right now. But just a few examples here: the increased hostility directed towards East Asian and Southeast Asian communities, which existed very much pre-pandemic, intensified during the pandemic and has continued post-pandemic, if we are in a post-pandemic state. Increased levels of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, transphobia, the backlash against Black Lives Matter movements and other progressive social movements, and the very real repercussions of that backlash. Increased violence online, violence towards buildings, places of worship, people. These are horrible times that we're in, and a lot of this hostility happens under the radar. So this is the context that I think we need to bear in mind when we're trying to make sense of hate crime. And it's no surprise, really, that according to official figures, hate crimes are going up year in, year out. I flagged up some of the figures for England and Wales. So these are police recorded hate incidents. Many of you will be familiar with these statistics, and you'll see that there's been a 9% rise from previous year's record total. So it's a continuing pattern that we're seeing. I've broken these figures down strand by strand, so you get a sense of how they vary. You can see that almost 3/4 of police recorded hate incidents of racist hate crimes, but pretty significant increases across the board, with the exception of religiously motivated hate crime, which is an anomaly, I think, an 18% drop there. And it's puzzled a few of us in this room why there's a drop when we know that there's evidence to suggest that Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in particular have spiked recently. So I would argue this is probably more to do with the way in which religiously motivated and racially motivated incidents can get conflated at the recording stage, but that's probably a conversation for another time and another day. The general pattern is one of increase, and that figure of 9% for disability hate crime is one that I'm going to come on to very shortly. Why the increase? A number of reasons, really. I've flagged up 3. I think there have been genuine, sincere improvements in police recording practices. I think the police are better at recording and monitoring hate incidents than was previously the case. And you're going to hear a bit later on about some of the improvements that police forces have made and some of the good practice that feeds into the work that they do. I think it's also fair to say that there have been a number of trigger events in recent years. I've flagged up some examples there. I'm sure you can think of countless others, but typically we see a significant spike in hate incidents in the immediate aftermath of trigger events like this. And all of this paves the way for the mainstreaming of hostile attitudes that we see within our political rhetoric, within media narratives, and within everyday conversations. It's really important to remember that this isn't just a bunch of extremists or people with a set of beliefs talking in a particularly hostile way. This is entrenched prejudice that feeds into everyday conversations. So, some interesting numbers. 9,943. So this was the total number of disability hate crimes recorded by the police in 2020, 2021. That was a 9% rise, if you remember from the previous slide. So a significant rise, a significant number. And yeah, I find this number even more interesting, 24%. This is the proportion of victims likely to report any of their experiences of hate crime to the police. This is a consistent figure across pretty much all of the research studies that we've undertaken at the Centre for Hate Studies. Now, this is interesting because we know that the vast majority of victims are unlikely to experience hate crime as an isolated one-off. These are repetitive problems that have a cumulative set of impacts, right? So if you've got a victim of hate crime, the vast majority of victims of hate crime are reluctant to share any of those experiences with the police and other organisations. Then we know that that figure of 9,943 is fairly meaningless. It's the tip of the iceberg. And the true scale is much, much bigger. So many incidents are taking place under the radar. And until we get to the nub of that, we're nowhere. Another interesting figure, 360. That's the total number of prosecutions brought against perpetrators of disability hate crime in 2020. It's nowhere near enough. And you're going to hear from the CPS later on. It's acknowledged by the CPS that this isn't enough, and there's really good work going on within the organisation to try and address these kinds of challenges. But it's really important that you listen to the work that's going on, you challenge it where it needs to be challenged, we learn from it, and we can all work collectively to do better than this. And this number I find just staggering, 33,546. That is the number of people who reported a hate crime to the police in 2020, but then withdrew from proceedings. So it's an abandonment rate of 32%, 3 times higher than the ridiculously high figure of 2015. So we've got a problem, major set of problems, and this all feeds into what Mark Walters describes as the justice gap. And you're going to hear from Mark a little bit later, who might talk a bit more lucidly about this, so that and how important it is for us to grasp this. So we've got a ridiculously high number of disability hate crimes taking place. We've got a ridiculously high number of hate crimes going under the radar. We've got problems with reporting, potential problems with recording, definite problems when it comes to prosecutions, convictions, and victims feeling a sense of justice. And these are all themes that you're going to be exploring more and more over the course of today. I think all of this tells me that it's pretty difficult to make sense of hate crime by just looking at its visibility within the official figures. I think it makes much more sense to make sense of hate crime by looking at its invisibility. I think we're talking about a largely invisible set of problems which aren't always reported, aren't always recorded, but they routinely affect victims from different backgrounds, different walks of life. You're all familiar with these kinds of examples, and I'm going to share some more examples of this shortly. We're also talking about a largely invisible set of victims who commonly find themselves on the margins of mainstream society, people who often don't have that bargaining clout of political, economic or social mobility to draw from, people who are often written off as hard to reach, when they're not hard to reach, they're just easy to ignore. And we're often talking about a largely invisible set of harms. We focus so much as criminologists, as criminal justice practitioners, on physical injury, and we often forget the harms to mental health, the harms to emotional well-being, the harms to our partners, our parents, our kids, our wider communities. So all of these harms, these corrosive harms, I think are very evident when we start to have conversations with victims of disability hate crime. We're very lucky within the Centre of Hate Crime, Centre of Hate Studies, I've forgotten the name of my own centre, the Centre of Hate Studies. We've worked with over 2,000 victims of hate crime over the past decade, and it's been quite harrowing, but it's an immense privilege because people are willing to share their stories with us in a way that they perhaps haven't done before. Many of you in this room have your own lived experience of hate crime. Many of you in this room work very closely with victims, so you're going to be very familiar with the themes that I'm going to share with you on this slide. I should include a trigger warning. There are some quotations that I'm going to share here from victims of disability hate crime. It's horrible stuff, it's graphic, it's difficult, but you all know that. That's why you're at this conference. You know this is difficult, horrible terrain, so I haven't included a formal trigger warning. So I'm not going to read these out. You can read them for yourself. The top one, Tony. Tony was targeted on the basis of his learning difficulties. Speaks of a whole set of emotions that I think resonate really strongly with all of us. Feeling empty, angry, upset, confused, feeling hollow as a result of his experiences. The second quotation, Lou, targeted on the basis of her disability and her gender identity whilst at university. And I think this really reinforces the importance of thinking about the relevance of multiple aspects of our identity. It's so easy to put us all into boxes and say you're an ethnic minority, you're disabled, you're gay, you're trans. But we've all got multiple aspects of our identities, and it's a way in which they intersect with one another and with other situational aspects that's so relevant to the process of victimisation, to the experience, to the impacts. And again, we'll see more examples of that as we go on throughout today. Will, targeted on the basis of his mental health, talking about some horrific experiences of physical violence. Michael, targeted on the basis of his physical disabilities. Michael, 61, when we conducted this interview, and father of 3, had a really difficult time on the basis of his disabilities, but he described his experiences of hate crime as torture because he had a group of teenagers outside his door shoving excrement through his letterbox, setting fire to his wheelie bin, hiding his mobility scooter, and this was happening day in, day out, nothing being done. Jazz, targeted on the basis of her learning disabilities and her ethnicity, referring to what she felt was the permanence of disability hate crime. She talks about it throughout the life cycle of being at school, throughout childhood, throughout adulthood. It doesn't go away. And then when somebody says, actually, you shouldn't accept this isn't right, well, it's too late because it's been normalised. Not just by society, but by her as well as a victim. So hopefully these are themes that you're all very familiar with. As I said, you're going to return to these themes over the course of today, but they're ones that I think we should bear in mind. Just in the little time, don't know how long I've got, but I want to say a few words about, am I right? Yeah, perfect. I want to say a few words about barriers to justice. Again, I think these are themes that are going to crop up again and again today, and they're themes that hopefully are close to your heart. We know that there is limited take-up of alternative reporting options. Often this is because of a widespread lack of awareness. Victims just aren't aware that they're out there. Often they're seen as inaccessible as well. So it's not enough for us to say, oh, there's this brilliant new reporting service. We need to monitor it. We need to evaluate whether there's take-up, and if there's not, we need to do something about it. And I'm dumbfounded at how often we don't do that. Engagement. We know that from the research evidence, there's limited engagement with the kinds of localised, tailored support services that can make such a key difference, because we live in times where we're seeing widespread closures or significant cuts to resources, to the services that we so badly need. We've seen this as a result of austerity measures over this past decade or so, and we're seeing it continue through the cost of living crisis. We also know from the research evidence that there are huge levels of anxiety relating to a whole set of factors. I've highlighted 3 here: not being taken seriously, not being treated with empathy, and being accused of wasting police time. It happens time and time again. And interestingly, the research evidence shows that there's a perceived hierarchy of protected characteristics, whereby race in particular can sometimes be privileged within victims' interpretations of what matters to the criminal justice system. So sometimes we get victims of disability hate crime saying to us, well, if I was black or if I was Asian, I'd be taken more seriously by the criminal justice system, which is a really interesting perception. I'm not sure it's true, but it's a very real perception that crops up time and time again. And I've flagged it up because perceptions like this are really important for us to acknowledge and take seriously. It's important to our responses, but it's also important to the way in which we communicate with victims of hate crime. And I think there's a journey for us all to go on when it comes to communication, and not just the responses themselves. So a set of problems at that initial stage. I think the evidence shows they're compounded by what is often felt to be a very slow, a very intimidating and an incomprehensible criminal justice system. Any of us who've worked with the criminal justice system or been involved with the criminal justice system at any point in our lives, I think would echo this. It's clunky, it's terrifying, quite frankly, for anybody involved. And I think these problems have been exacerbated and exposed by the pandemic as well. Particular sets of frustrations when it comes to low numbers of prosecutions, a perceived high evidential threshold, and a perceived lack of communication through the various stages of the criminal justice process. So there's much work that needs to be done. There is much work that's going on, but much work that needs to be done in this space. And interestingly, we know from our research evidence that significant numbers of victims of hate crime want to see alternatives to criminal justice outcomes. There's often this assumption that victims demand tougher justice, whatever that means, or enhanced sentences for hate crime cases. And that is sometimes the case, but it's not always the case. And instead, we've seen overwhelming support for alternatives like tailored programs of education within prisons, within schools, within local communities. So more focus on preventative work. We see a lot of calls for community payback orders or something of that nature that takes place within the community, and significant numbers in favour of more facilitated dialogue between the victim and the offender, so restorative interventions. So I guess the take-home message for me from this feedback from victims is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to responding to hate crime. I think it's important to have a package of different interventions. And for me, I think it's critical that we stop seeing hate crime as a criminal justice issue exclusively. This is a public health issue that demands holistic interventions from a range of different actors, from a range of different sectors. And again, hopefully that will be really important to the conversations that we have today. It's all too easy to lay the blame or lay responsibility at one particular agency's door, and that just doesn't work. I think Leicester's a really good example of having partners who work together from different sectors, and I know this is happening elsewhere, but again, there's more that we can do. There's more that we can do as academics and activists to actually raise that awareness within communities as well, and encourage more people from different sectors to take ownership. These issues were really brought home to me when I worked with Grant 10 years ago. Some of you will know Grant personally, because he's a big player in Leicester now. We see him quite a lot, and Grant was also a major player in the Harms of Hate film that we made 10 years ago on the back of the Leicester Hate Crime Project. And I'm very lucky I'm going to have a chance to work with Grant later this year to revisit the Harms of Hate film and work with some of those victims and see what's going on 10 years on. And it's been an extraordinary decade. Grant, for those of you who don't know Grant has suffered a lifetime of harassment on the basis of his learning disabilities, a major speech impediment. He's experienced all sorts of different examples of hate crime, violence, cuckooing, lots of stuff has gone on in Grant's life. He tried to take his own life on numerous occasions, thankfully unsuccessfully. But when you talk to Grant about justice, you start to get very, very frustrated, because he felt he was passed from pillar to post to lots of different stakeholders, lots of different agencies, and the focus is very much on target hardening measures. For Grant, that reinforces his sense of isolation from mainstream society. He doesn't want that. He wants to feel welcomed. He wants to feel belonged. He wants to feel listened to. None of it really stopped the harassment. None of it has really got to the nub of why the hate crimes are happening. So for Grant, he wanted to see much more focus on restorative dialogue. He wanted offenders to be able to come face to face with victims and start to understand the impact of their actions and behaviour and why it causes so much damage. So that's just one example of somebody who I think has really come forward in saying that alternatives are required. We can be more nuanced in the way in which we respond. And that brings me onto my final slide. What can we do? I could bang on for hours about this, and I'm not going to. I've reined myself in, because I think this conference is all about what we can do, really. But what I wanted to leave you with 10 improvements that hate crime victims have shared with us. These improvements crop up time and time again in the conversations that we have. Let me flag them up. I'm not going to go through them one by one, because you can see them on that slide. Hopefully, what you see there is a set of suggestions that aren't all that surprising, aren't all that extraordinary, aren't all that difficult for us to meet, and yet it's not really happening. And I think as a bare minimum, we can start to move in that direction, and then we'll be making such an immense difference. So these themes are going to crop up again as your speakers run through the programme. I want you to think about them as audience members. You'll all have your own suggestions, your own ideas born from your work, from your lived experience. And I think a day like today is important because you can share those. And if we do nothing else today, I think we can really start to learn from one another and get some collective momentum that drives forward these initiatives, so we can do more and we can do better in this space. Thank you. I'm going to stop there. Cheers.
Fathers of hate crime research in this country, is very broadly respected for his views and his inputs in the research he's conducted. But it's not all about academics today, although we're fortunate enough to have some great learned experts in the room, and they're going to share their expertise with us later in the day, and we're looking forward to that. But first of all, let's reset for a moment. It's kind of assumed we know what hate crime is. Let's put it in simple terms. Hate crimes are hostility against people because of who they are, and they can fall into two distinct categories under British legislation: hate incidents and hate crimes. There was a reference by the Home Secretary just 2.5 months ago that hate incidents should really be overlooked because they were tying down police time. I don't think that did anybody any particular favours. But hate incidents are simply occurrences without a criminal offence being conducted. Hate crimes are where there's a criminal offence attached to it. So keeping the definition simple, we'll work on those today. Unfortunately, hate crime legislation in this country is a kind of a hodgepodge. It's a kind of a potboiler of different pieces of legislation that have come together. In racial terms, some of it is derived from the old Race Relations Act. There are hate crimes indicated in footballing legislation, in stirring up racial hatred, in anti-terrorist legislation. But for disability hate crime and hate incidents, there is no one piece of legislation. There is no one piece of the legislative framework that we can turn to and say, this is I produced a beautiful slide and forgot to put it on, sorry about that, that we can turn to. And Mark Walters later will be talking about the change in the legislative process and the Law Commission report, which is trying to move us forward in terms of having a piece of legislation that we can hook ourselves onto. Also, disability hate crimes and incidents often are everyday incidents, overlooked, undervalued, incidents that are almost meaningless, things that can just pass and nobody notices. Hannah Mason-Bish later is talking about touching, unwanted touching of women and girls. Instances that can just be passed off as completely accidental, without meaning, but nevertheless cause enormous offence and cause people to change their attitudes and become emotionally tired of what's going on in life. Everyday incidents are like a trickle. They build up, they almost come to a point where you can take them no longer. I don't like talking about myself particularly, but when I was smaller, my favourite place was under my parents' bed, because I was beaten up so often because of my autism that it was the best place to be. The trouble with cutting yourself off from society and isolating yourself, especially in later life, is that it means you're less able to go out and look for work, you're less able to find education, you're less able to find friends, you're less able to watch the sunrise. And those are important factors when you live a life of fear. And fear is a long-term, hard-pressing, real hard-hitting, horrible effect that I would wish on nobody at all. I'm not a long-standing academic. There are some of those in this room, and they have enormously professional reputations. I'm not one of those people. The first 400 years of my life I spent in other work. I came into academia later, and with enormous support from colleagues, people like Neil, been able to sort of hone my anger into writing and talking about the subject, because it's no use just being angry. We have to change the world as well, and we have to change the society, the legislation, the understanding, the education of what everybody goes through in order to make it a better place. If we just wanted to leave it as the same place, there's no point in any of this. The point of this is to change things. I talked that there was no one single piece of legislation that particularly impacts on disability hate crime. The only real legislation that's available at the moment is some stuff that will increase the sentence of an offender who has carried out a disability hate crime, providing we can prove motivation. And that is the hardest thing to do, because to prove that somebody has committed a crime because they are offending against a disabled person because of that disability is enormously difficult to prove. We almost have to get a statement from them saying that that's why they carried out the crime, and that's not going to happen in most cases. So it's enormously difficult to get what's called a sentence uplift under the Criminal Justice Act 2003. The bar for evidence is so high, it's rarely used, and motivation is rarely established. So talking with people from the Crown Prosecution Service, what they often do is try and get a conviction under a lesser offence, the Public Order Act 1984, whereby the burden of proof is less and there is more chance of getting a conviction rather than look for the sentence uplift under the Criminal Justice Act that I mentioned a moment ago. And we'll be hearing more from the Crown Prosecution Service later. And we'll be hearing more from Leicestershire Police as well in their fight to tackle hate crime. The reporting of hate crime and incidents is an extremely difficult process. I think it's unique with victims of disability hate crime that sometimes you might have to face the decision of reporting your own family members, your own friends, your carer, people who give you intimate services, people you trust and love, people you didn't think would ever let you down, and they do. And how are we going to report those to the police or to any other agency? How are we going to go to the point of dobbing somebody in that we rely on and possibly losing a friend, possibly losing an intimate carer in a time when intimate carers are extremely rare anyway, possibly ostracising a family member with the real fear that we will never speak to them again in our lives? How can we use the current reporting framework to smash these relationships to pieces? In some circumstances, it's better just to put up with it. It's better just to put up with the taunting every day. It's better just to put up with the touching that's inappropriate. It's better just to put up with the jokes and the burden and the crap that's thrown at you. Because it's easier to do that than it is to put a great big cleft through a family or through a working personal relationship, which are hard enough to establish anyway. I know what it's like to hate yourself. I'm not my best friend. I know what it's like when people do hate you and you feel undervalued, to the point where there really isn't any point in continuing on this world. Because if you hate yourself, then what's the point in searching for value from others? I know that people are tired of being socially isolated. We run the Disability Hate Crime Network, which is an online service. People are contacting us daily with frustrations about their isolation, with their fears, with their absolute madness at trying to get hold of reporting organisations to break through and achieve justice, to try and achieve a normal lifestyle, which is basically all what people want. People are not chasing compensation or great credit, but just to achieve some form of normality that they can work through on a daily basis. I don't want anyone to be like me and hide under a bed. It was a darn uncomfortable bed as well, I should add. There's lots of dust and stuff. It's not very good under beds. So just basically to sum up, why are we here? We've established now what hate crimes and hate incidents are. We've looked at some of the local data which Neil and his team put together. Later on, we'll be talking about prosecution, enforcement, touching, and the law of the future. And there'll also be some entertainment, which I hope you're looking forward to. But we're here because life is difficult enough without being the butt of other people's prejudice. Life is difficult enough without people looking to take out their frustrations on other people. Because of historical events, we're here. It was in this county in 2007 that Fiona Pilkington took her life and that of her daughter Frankie. Pushed to the point where they could take everyday abuse no more. I don't want that to happen again. We're here because disability is already at the bottom of many people's agendas. In government, in local agencies, in the media, how many disabled people are sponges? How many are there simply to withdraw funds from the rest of society and contribute nothing to it? Already getting a bad press without having to be the butt of other people's frustrations, ignorance, lack of education and bias. We're here because many public agencies who should protect disabled people and other vulnerable sets of people do not do their job. We're here because of the frustrations of agencies that we rely upon, or should rely upon, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and other similar agencies who we look to for leadership. We look to for legislative enforcement. We look to because we trust them. And sometimes we look in vacuous horror at what we get out of those organisations. We're here because the phrase, nothing about us without us. We're here because we're the ones that are going to have to make the change. We're going to have to be the ones who initiate and trigger the next stages of where we go next. But we can't do it alone. We can't do it as people with disabilities. We've got to do it as all people, in understanding and education, and in building bridges and in building trust. We can't do it as a kind of exclusive entity. We've got to work with able-bodied and disabled people alike to move the agenda forward, to bring change and to bring hope. We'll be here to build bridges in society between the able-bodied and the disabled, to try and provoke education, to raise levels of interest, to raise levels of awareness, to try and beat and trample the bias which is born out of fear of the unknown, to try and overcome those great gaps in knowledge that people seem to thrive in and to use to their own advantage against other people who are more vulnerable. We're also here because if we don't, nobody will. If we don't do it, if we don't trigger this, as Neil has been saying earlier, I did listen, as Neil was saying earlier, why are we still here in 2022 talking about this? The human rights movement in the late 60s, kicking off the hate crime movement as such, the legislation in the USA in the 90s, the legislation in the UK 20 odd years ago, has raised our awareness of hate crime and its possibilities, hate crime and its impacts, hate crime and its sheer prejudice. And 2022, here we are, trying to rekindle the debate, trying to trigger change. As Neil said, we shouldn't be here at all. But fortunately, it's coming up for lunch later on, so I'm glad we are. We're here also because we can. Because the people sitting in this auditorium, the people watching across the world, because the people who don't want to watch, because of their embarrassment or their unwillingness to put funding into change or their unwillingness to change in social terms. We're here, we have to do the work, we have to put in the hours because nobody's going to do it for us. It is important that we light the fire, to start the conversation, to seek justice and pave the way for understanding, awareness and hope. And it's going to be down to us to do it. Because no longer should we have to hide under beds. No longer should we just accept being spat on for the third time that week as normal. How often is it that we take an ordinary journey on a bus or a train, or we walk into town, or we cross the road, or we collect a benefit that we're entitled to, that somebody says, why are you getting that? Well, how often have we got to put up with this and have our everyday lives turned into tortuous journeys of fear, isolation, and nonsense? That has got to stop. It's within our grasp to do it. And later on, there'll be a little bit more history made. The first piece of history was this conference, the first one, I believe, of its type in the world. Later on, there'll be some more history made in the country's first hate crime charter, which is being presented today with the support of our friends in Disability Rights UK. We've been working with them to produce this document. It's not going to be absorbed straight away. It's not going to be taken seriously straight away. It's going to be shunned and it's going to be moved on by local authorities and other agencies. It's going to not be referred to. It's going to be just another thing to gather dust on a shelf. I know all that. I'm not completely naive. But what it does is it starts a chain, hopefully a chain reaction, where people might take notice, people might try to incorporate in their organisations, their companies, their local authority, their agency work, that they can refer to and know not only what they should be doing about disability hate crime, but how it affects other people. And Bethany is with us to introduce that document this afternoon, another history-changing moment. Already, these agencies in national terms and local terms should be adhering to equality principles and should be telling us about their performance in how they deliver those quality principles. I know that looking up local authority websites is not perhaps the most exciting thing in the world, especially when there's a big football match on or something else. Who wants to look at their local authority website? You know, forgive me for saying so, but I probably wouldn't either. But these equality objectives are not posted, they're not met, they're not monitored, they're not performance managed, and they're not reported on. And when agencies don't carry them out, the law is not enforced. It's almost as if we're fighting a battle in a very, very steep hill. So here we are together to do something about it. And it isn't going to be easy. It isn't going to be a pushover. It's not even going to be very short. But I hope with the people we've got with us today and the little bit of history we're going to make later, that it will be the start, nowhere near the end, but it will be the start of a journey that we've got to push on. Because as I said, if we don't, nobody will. Thank you for listening. Okay, thank you everyone, thank you. Okay, if I could ask your attention, please. Thank you very much. Oh, it worked. Right, okay. Let's move on with the second session, and thanks for all the beautiful comments that you made during the coffee break, which delayed me getting a coffee, but I got the best bit at the end of the thing. I'd like to introduce Leah to you to talk about the impacts of disability hate. Leah works out of Liverpool Hope University and has done lots of research on everyday hate and stuff like that, and is currently involved in a major project, which I won't go into too much detail about. So Leah.
Thanks, David. Is this okay? Can you all hear me? Yeah, fab. So as David said, I'm going to be thinking about some of the impacts of disability hate crime, some of the good, some of the bad. A lot of the bad I don't think will be very surprising to everyone in this room, but I am going to move towards the end to think about some of the, if you can say, positive impacts, which came about from the research that I did for my PhD. So do kind of tweet away if you're on Twitter, and yeah, I would give a trigger warning, but I think we've already had that. We've kind of set the scene for what today's about, and I think, as I said, the bad stuff I think is what everyone kind of expects from this kind of subject matter anyway. So as David said, I'm really interested in disability hate crime within the context of everyday life. So those everyday incidents, those things that happen really regularly, that accumulate. And I was really interested throughout the PhD in how that really changes what everyday space becomes for a lot of disabled people. So how it feels like, how these spaces are experienced when everyday hate is kind of at a risk when occupying some of those spaces. So we're thinking about these ordinary spaces, places that we go to on a regular basis, the shops, the pub, you know, town centres, just walking down the street, all of these spaces that for a lot of people you might pass through without really thinking about, but actually for some people these can be really loaded spaces and can be quite risky, in need of navigation. So it's thinking about for people where, you know, bodies aren't really seen to fit in, people are seen to be othered within those spaces. How does that feel, and how do these spaces become in different ways? So how do experiences of disability hate crime within these spaces, how does that shape what we can do in those spaces, and particularly how we occupy them in the future? So how do our past experiences change the way that we maybe move and interact with those spaces, and with other people in those spaces too? So the research project itself, it went on for about 3 years. It felt like a lifetime, and it feels like a lifetime ago as well, even though it really wasn't that long ago. So 2017 to 2020, based at the University of Leeds. I was really lucky to work with 6 organisations, some of whom are here today, and I'm very excited to see some familiar faces. So I worked with disabled people's organisations, peer support groups, and a kind of charity day centre as well. The research took part in 3 stages. So the first was arts-based workshops, and that was making mood boards about what hate crime is, about people's experiences of hate crime. And as we go through some of the findings today, I've got some of those mood boards that I'll share, and I'll describe them kind of as we get to them. I then did some more traditional interviews, and then at the end did some reflective workshops, which was a really nice opportunity to, you know, I'd kind of done all of the data generation to kind of go back to those organisations and say, like, this is what I think. These are the things that I think have come up. What do you think? And it was kind of a nice brainstorming exercise to look at some of those key themes that had come across. And when I was writing up the PhD, I got quite hung up and quite interested in effect theory, which I think for some people probably seems like just a fashionable thing to do. But actually, I really was interested in how people are affected by these experiences, and how, as I said, it really changes some of those spaces, and how it kind of shapes the way that we move within those. And Sarah Ahmed was a kind of key person that I, you know, read cover to cover, as you do with some of these things. And this quote is something that I had stuck on my wall as I was writing the thesis. So it says, "We make a world out of the shattered pieces, even when we shatter the pieces, or even when we are the shattered pieces." And for me, I just think that really signifies that these really awful things happen, And as we've said, you know, as the theme of today has been, often it's incidents that are happening daily, really regularly. These things happen and they can shatter us, but we make something from that process. So even when we, you know, shatter the pieces, or we are the shattered pieces, something comes from that. And that's what I really want to focus on today. So there are some of the, you know, the negative impacts of hate crime that I'll talk about, but also some of the more positive things that come about from those experiences that I learned from working with disabled people through the research process. So the first thing, long-lasting harm. So I've got Rose's mood board on the screen. People spoke about, you know, these things, even an incident can happen over a matter of seconds. We know that the harms can be much more long-lasting than that. And people spoke about this haunting effect. You know, it doesn't leave you, it doesn't just go away. And on Rose's mood board, she's got along the side bad dreams. And a couple of people spoke about flashbacks and nightmares, and how this, you know, it really stays with you. And I thought it really captured that on the mood board. So you've got bad dreams going along the right hand side, and then you've got these eyes kind of staring intensely. Francis Emerson said, "They say sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt me. But breaking your bones will heal and stuff. But sometimes words don't always leave." And I think that was really powerful. So often when we're talking about hate crime, there seems to be a kind of hierarchy of, you know, verbal abuse and name calling, kind of going along to physical abuse. But actually what people were saying is, you know, being called a name, having that every day, that really hurts. That is violent, that is upsetting, and there are long-lasting harms from that. You know, they don't leave. And some of the stuff that I'll go on to think about, it changes how you think about yourself when you're being called names. There was also some people spoke about grief and that grieving process, which I thought really signified how, you know, there's this like loss of something, that you can feel that there's a loss of something when you've experienced disability hate crime. Remaking identity. So I've got Francis Emerson's mood board on the screen. So there's a lot kind of to take in from that, but a lot of participants spoke about having to really change how they thought about themselves, that when you experience this on a regular basis, you lose confidence, you lose self-esteem, you start changing kind of who you think you are, you question yourself a lot more. And so Francis Emerson on their mood board talks about agony, you know, issues with anxiety. Will we ever feel safe and secure? That sense of discomfort, that you know, lack of security that people feel. Beta spoke about kind of hiding identity, which again we know is very common for a lot of people that experience hate crime, that kind of want to hide yourself away. So you used to be proud of yourself, now you're more in yourself, you're hiding away. Francis Emerson questioning, am I a bad person? I didn't choose to be like this. Am I going to burn in hell? And then Sapphire spoke about wearing makeup as a kind of putting a character on. So putting on being a different person and feeling more confident. So hiding some of those insecurities that you might feel. And this was a really significant theme in the research that again, you know, these incidents, that a range of different experiences that people had, but what was really key is that there's a change, there's a shift in how you think about your own identity, but also how you see yourself within that surrounding space. So how you kind of present yourself, how you occupy some of those everyday spaces, or not as well, which is what I'll go on to talk about too. So negotiating space. So this was a really big theme as well. In terms of a few different things. So in terms of the emotional labour that is required to be able to negotiate everyday space, but also in terms of the additional time, the kind of physical labour that's needed to go out and occupy some of these everyday spaces. So I've got Violet's mood board on the screen. So Violet experienced staring, verbal abuse kind of everywhere she went. And for her, that meant that she'd started just completely avoiding certain spaces. And again, that was really kind of common for a lot of people. So avoiding certain spaces completely, changing daily routines, so not travelling at certain times of the day, you know, not travelling when school kids are going to be, you know, travelling. And that, I think it's really important to highlight that can come at a, you know, a financial cost, but a physical and an emotional cost as well, to have to really routinely plan kind of where you're going in accordance to this risk of being targeted by hate crime. So Lynn said it makes you feel like a flat battery. You know, Lynn spoke about, you know, it's exhausting enough. There's enough that I've got to think about to be able to leave the house. So if someone, or, you know, if people do this on top of it, it's just completely exhausting. And that if anything happens, she said, I just tend to have to go home because I don't have the energy to continue trying to navigate and negotiate that space. Harry spoke about being driven out of spaces, you know, implicitly or explicitly, that you know that you're going to experience it. So actually it just drives you out of those spaces. And Harry spoke about going to the pub. So he was a young male wheelchair user, spoke about going to the pub with his girlfriend. And he said they'd kind of count how many kind of experiences do we have to experience tonight for it to still be a good night? You know, how many can we just let pass by, and how many does it take for it to ruin the night completely? And then Dr. Who spoke about this kind of increased stress level. So your stress level goes up, your blood pressure goes up, you're paranoid, you're looking around everywhere you go. And that sense of risk, that fear of being targeted, really changes how comfortable you can feel within those spaces. And as I said, that can really drive you out of a lot of ordinary spaces that, you know, often I probably occupy without even thinking about a lot of those things. So you're scared, so you stress out day in, day out, and that has a real impact on where you go, what time you go, whether you go there at all. So I did say that we'd do negative and then we'd move to the positive. So we are through the worst of it, and we'll start thinking about some of the more positive things that can come from this. So a lot of people spoke about this kind of navigation, so navigating hate, really based upon the knowledge and experience that people have. So you've got that, you know, saying we've got this really unique sense of the world. We've got a really unique position where we've had to think of all of these things already. And actually that means that I occupy that space, having really thought out about it. And that, you know, using that knowledge, that we need to share that knowledge. So we've got the knowledge, we've got the experience, we need to share that with other people. So we need to, you know, this really awful thing has happened to me, but I want to try and make sure that it's not happening to other people. And that was a really, really nice thing to hear when you kind of amongst the doom and gloom of hate crime research, that, you know, want to use your experience to try and help someone else. Darius Gadinsky spoke about this accessibility plan that her and a friend were creating together. So it was about those places in the city centre that are accessible, not just physically, but in terms of the attitudes of people that are there. And so saying, you know, we're going to draw up a bit of a plan of the city to share with other disabled people. These are the places that I would suggest going to, and these are the places that I'd avoid. So again, just using some of those negative experiences to have a wider positive impact for other people. Collective resistance. So this is something that was probably the highlight for me. When I was working in these organisations and seeing how infectious that support, that level of support, those friendships, it was really, really lovely to be around. So Harry spoke about the power in disabled people's organisations, and you really feel it when you're there as well, and you're kind of embedded within that. So, you know, we're different in so many ways, but we've got this shared experience of oppression, and that shared experience is so powerful for being able to come together, work together, and to be able to start initiating change. And what we've got after me is we've got People First Merseyside and Leeds People First that are going to be talking about some of the collective resistance that they're doing already within the community. Sapphire spoke about, you know, that sense of support. We can talk to each other. We're different in ages, but we understand each other. It's a safe space where you can muck in and be yourself. And that was something that really came out, that it's a safe space when actually so many other places aren't safe. You know, they're quite risky. And then AD spoke about being able to tell your stories with no judgment, being able to voice an opinion. So a lot of the places that I worked with for the research, it wasn't just a get together. I mean, there were, you know, there's a lot of positives in just having that get together, but it was about being able to make a change, being able to work within the wider community, and being able to voice that and kind of put things together. So finally, what I wanted to kind of leave it on is about working collaboratively, and that's really what we wanted to try and harness with this conference, which is why we're you know, so lucky to have so many different people with us today. So Alex questioned me on the research that I was doing. He said it needs to be in a booklet, you know, it needs to be online, and he said instead of sitting around a table, we should be doing something. And that stayed with me the whole of the research. And I kept thinking, well, what am I doing? I'm doing this research, but what am I really doing? You know, what doing something do we do? Doing research isn't enough. What do we do with that research? And I felt like Alex really pulled me up on it and held me accountable. And I guess there are kind of limitations in a PhD of what you can do, but it's something that now I'm really trying to do something that actually has an impact. So I think that, you know, within hate studies, disability studies, we need to hold ourselves accountable. We need to sit with that discomfort of actually, maybe I'm not doing enough, you know, maybe I need to be doing more, maybe I need to talk outside of academia. So we need to do something and invest more energy into doing that. We need to be engaging with, learning from disabled people, and making our resources, even when they're really limited, which often they are, we need to try and make them more readily available to people outside of that space. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm coming out of a cold and it's a bit tough, but thank you very much. Here with us. So yeah. Do you want me to introduce?
Yes, please.
Yeah, of course. So is it? We've got Susan next. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got Susan joining us now. So Susan is from Leeds People First, and Susan's going to be sharing a little bit about the work that you do at Leap 1, Leeds People First. And I think we can really learn from some of the stuff that is going on. And then after that, we've got Phil from People First Merseyside. So I'll hand it over to you, Susan. Do you want a microphone as well? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Is it on? Yeah. Just checking. So yeah, thank you for having us to come and present today. Susan and I have worked together for 12 years, and I used to be the manager of Leap 1, which I aren't anymore. I sadly left in February, but Susan is still carrying on the work, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that we did over the 12 years together, of working together. So, that one. Okay, fab. So Susan, do you want to say a little bit about you and how you got involved in it all?
My name is Susan Hanley, and I'm also I got involved of hate crime.
So what were some of the things that you did? You know, what you tell everybody that you're an, what are you? You're an ambassador.
Oh yeah, and also I'm an ambassador for safeguarding, and also I'm an ambassador for people with disabilities in Leeds.
So you've done lots of work around that, and
Yeah.
your safeguarding ambassador work. And what did you do with around your safeguarding ambassador work?
Well, I'm trying to get people with disabilities to speak up for themselves, try and get people to realise that what is happening to them, that we've got a number that can help them to talk about it, and helplines as well.
Okay, we'll move back on. That one.
And also to talk to the police.
So we started campaigning, oh gosh, a while back now, didn't we, Susan? Because of one of our members called Claire.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the audience about the story about Claire?
Yes, I can do. Claire is one of our members. She's got a learning disability herself. But what happened with her, that it was more like a hate crime in a way. She was in a bar, and these and some people came over and said, "Can I sit next to you?" And also they said as well, "Will you buy his drinks?" And that's what happened as well. And after that,
So they
said that when they come back with us, and went back to the flat, and what happened after that, they abused her, and also took her money, and all the stuff was all a mess. So that's what happened as well.
So they'd befriended her basically, hadn't they, in the pub, and they got her to buy all the drinks, then took her back to their house and abused her, took her money and took her card. So it was horrific, really. So the members of Leap One wanted to really make a difference, didn't they, and campaign against.
And that's what I'm going to say about Claire again. She stood up at the council chambers and said it. She said how she felt, what happened to her, and she stood up and campaigned it.
So every year they do People's Parliament. So People's Parliament, do you want to say a little bit about what People's Parliament is?
People's Parliament is where people with disabilities come together and work on different projects. Like if someone wants to make a book or something, like that magazine.
So so the Be Me strategy is a strategy.
The Be Me strategy. There are different categories what goes in there, and also we try and get people that look at the pictures, what goes with the text. So people with disabilities get together and work on them. We get support to help them as well.
That's right. And one of those, so the BME strategy is to improve the lives of people with learning disabilities, isn't it? And
That's
to make it better for people with learning disabilities. Yeah. And part of that, Leap One led on the hate crime campaigning.
Yeah, we started that the hate crime campaign.
So we wanted to talk to all the members of Leap One and say, like, what can we do about this? We don't want this to happen again. What can we do to raise awareness? And so we listened to what they told us.
Yeah.
And what did they say, Susan? Can you remember what they said about the raising awareness? Can you remember what they said they wanted to do?
They wanted to do a campaign around hate crime.
Yeah. And where did they do it? Can you remember? Where did we start doing it? Where was the first thing?
What is that?
It was.
It was we started doing a rap about hating hate crime.
So all the members,
And all the members all put their lyrics onto that rap, and that's how we started it off.
So we're going to play it. Obviously, we want you all to join in the chorus and lighten the mood a little bit. And they did all the lyrics. It was amazing. So yeah, we're going to play the rap now, and I think we go on the next one. Hopefully, it will play. Yeah.
This is a rap about hate and hate crime.
We're to tell you it's not fine. If not killed, being killed. Picking on people is so cruel.
It's not fair to stand and stare.
We may be different, but we don't care.
Let's put an end to this hostility.
Everyone has different ability.
We need to know who is our friend.
So we bring these crimes to an end.
Try to see things through other people's eyes.
You know the score, come on, get right.
This is a rap about hate and hate crime.
We're to tell you it's not fine. If not killed, being killed. Picking on people is so cruel.
It's not fair to stand and stare.
We may be different, but we don't care.
Let's put an end to this hostility.
Everyone has different ability.
We need to know who is our friend.
So we bring these crimes to an end.
Try to see things through other people's eyes.
You know the score, come on, get right.
And the lyrics are amazing because all these guys thought of the lyrics. So it's hats off to all the members. So this was more about how else. So we did the rap, didn't we? And what else did we then want to go and do to really raise awareness? Because our members reported that lots of teenagers were the perpetrators of the hate crimes, you know, especially when they were travelling on public buses and places like that. So what did we, as Leap One, decide to do?
We decided to go to schools, year 6 primary schools, so they raise awareness that people that children, before they go into the big schools, to raise awareness that saying that we try and get people to be treated fairly, and that's the reason why we started to do it. We do one on the bus scene and also on the street scene. So on the bus scene is more hate crime, and on the streets there's hate crime on the streets as well. But there's another one as well you can do on the streets as well. It's hate crime.
So we did 2 performances, but they said they wanted to go to year 6, age 11, that is in primary schools, before they got to the teenage years, so that they could do more preventative work. So I'll play a little bit of the real friends, a little bit more about what it's all about.
People with learning disabilities are experiencing hate and hate crimes. Hate crime can be a crime against somebody because of their race, their religion, sexuality and disability. And hate crime is when somebody pretends to be a vulnerable person's friend for their own gain. Leap One is a self-advocacy organisation supporting adults with learning disabilities to speak up in the community.
My name is Susan Hanley, and I've got a learning disability myself. I've got Down syndrome. The reason why we put on the play because some of our members have been the victim of hate and hate crime. I'm one of those people who are very passionate what I do. I feel that I want people with disabilities to be heard, supported, not just people with disabilities. Anyone can get victimised.
So hi, my name's Mandy. We're here today to talk about the importance of what hate crime and hate crime is. We have a few of our members that have been victims of hate crimes and hate crimes, and it's really affected them. And so we're wanting to talk to you lot today about how to report it. If you see anybody that's been a bully, that you know how to report it as well. So I hope you enjoy the show today, and thank you for inviting us. Everything in the play is formulated from our members, and then they wanted to do a performance for year 6 school children because it's important to go into schools before they get to teenage years so that we can hopefully make a difference.
Why are you reading that paper?
I can't even read. Get back to school, Fico.
The show is presented in Forum Theatre, so we take 2 small scenes, one of them hate crime and one of hate crime, and we run the scene.
Will you just leave him alone?
And then we stop the scene and we allow the audience to chat about how they would change that particular incident for the better and what the characters could have done.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go back in time, we're going to take all these suggestions, we're going to do our scene again.
The experience in the play of mine. It's basically about bullying and some people pretend to be your friends and they're not your friends.
Please, Olivia, do not tell me you've done this before.
People don't always know I have autism. My family do, and people where I live in do, but if someone on the street wouldn't. I think doing this play have made me realise don't be afraid of somebody, show them that you're not frightened of them.
We've got some amazing feedback so far. All the pupils and the teachers, they felt that we've made a difference. So it's really important for us to continue. Without that funding, we won't be able to.
Just got some more funding to continue that, so that's brilliant that they can do that. But I do feel that that's only a small dip in the ocean. You know, it should be really brought into schools, and I think that was mentioned earlier about education in schools. I think that's really important. So this young lady, do you want to say who she is, Susan? Do you want to talk about her?
This is a lady called Amy. She's got a learning disability herself. Has she got Down syndrome? She got Down syndrome? Yeah. She's got Down syndrome as well. And what happened is that to go on the bus and we got to where she wanted to be, and also what happened, she wanted to go to the friendship group, and
so friendship group is something that Leap One ran on an evening.
yeah, that's on a Wednesday evening. It's where people socialise, go out to places, and also that then when she was going home, these gangsters start to come.
So this is the first time she's been on a bus as well. Her mum, this was the very first time her mum had let her go on a bus on her own. And yeah, so what happened then?
Then when the gangsters came, that they were abusing her, saying a lot of different wrong, horrible names and that. And
so she got to the friendship group, got back, got off the bus, and that's when this gang of lads at the shops just stood in her way, wouldn't let her go past, calling her names. And so obviously that knocks somebody's confidence, doesn't it? You know, it's the first time they've been able to travel alone, and you know, she's back not wanting to travel alone again. But we sat on the hate crime strategic board in Leeds, so we knew where most of the hate crimes were happening, and what we did in response to that is went to the local school near to where that incident happened, and so we educated the children there. And I mean, we also talked about invisible disabilities because we thought that was really important. And at the end of that, we had a one of the young pupils who was a mixed race pupil came to us and said, all the kids called me mucky. So, you know, just things like that still go on just saddens me so much. And yeah, so we'll go to the next slide. So Susan, do you want to say a little bit about your training, your disability awareness training that you do?
What I try and do is, this is what you call disability awareness training I do by people with lived experiences. And now what I try and do, I train all professionals, like the police and that.
What did you do in lockdown? Tell
What did I do in lockdown? I trained 72 police officers to talk to the people with disabilities have been victims. So, and people with disabilities might be frightened if they've got their uniforms on. So we're going to make sure they feel more comfortable by me talking to the police through lockdown, and I try and get people to speak people in different in their language.
And I think you've got a point, you know, around the uniform as well. You know, a lot of people with learning disabilities are frightened of the uniform. You know, there's that fear, isn't there? Again,
underneath those uniforms, they are human beings.
So as we said earlier, we sat on the strategic board, but I felt that because I wanted Susan to be sat on that board, not me, it should have been Susan that should be there. So I think all these hate crime strategic boards should have somebody on there with lived experience. So it isn't just a tokenistic gesture, you know, it is purposeful. And so that you can have the valid input from all levels and the people that have suffered the crimes themselves. So, do you want to say thank you?
Thank you very much for listening to our campaign.
And you were going to say at the end?
Nothing about us without us.
Yeah, nothing about us without us, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone follow that? That was superb. I've even got a chance at a singing career myself, perhaps. Okay. Yeah.
So we're now joined by Phil. So Phil is part of People First Merseyside and is incredibly passionate about disability hate crime and about using your experiences to try and prevent it from happening to other people. So you're going to talk into that one, Phil. Perfect.
Do I touch you? No. So good morning. My name's Phil, and this is my speech, keeping Sefton safe, and my hate crime story journey. So my name is Phil Hume. I am co-chair of People First Merseyside and a director. I get involved in all the project work within the organisation, as well as that I have lots of experience around hate crime. I am passionate and committed towards all the work we do at People First Merseyside. We are a self-advocacy group organisation speaking up for ourselves and others. We want people with learning disabilities to be treated equally and have the same chances as everyone else. I have been asked to come and talk to you today about my experience of hate crime. Over the years, I have been a victim and witness of hate crime, and it is now my passion to help the community to keep safe and not to become a victim themselves. My first experience of being a victim was many years ago. It was a summer's day, and even now it's still clear in my head. I had been out and before going into my flat, I decided to have a cigarette. I was minding my own business. There were lots of people around and about. One man shouted over to me, "Hey mate, give me a fag." I replied, you don't know, you know where the shops are. He then came over to me, and because I still didn't give him a cigarette, he punched me in the face. I was shocked. I shouted for help. I went into the nearest shop where they helped me. They told me to go straight to my flat so I could calm down. I was very frightened and shook up. I did not know, but someone had witnessed what had happened and had called the police. I was told that an officer would be coming out to talk to me and check I was okay. The police told me that because I had a learning disability, that this would be classed as disability hate crime. I had never heard of this before. I didn't really understand what it was. I then had to go to Marsh Lane Police Station to take a statement. The police kept in contact with me to check that I was okay. In the end, there was not enough evidence to prosecute the man. Oh, should I? So, my second experience of being a victim was after I had become a member of People First Merseyside and was more aware of what disability hate crime was. I was returning to my flat when I got into the lift. I bumped into two people whose faces were familiar, but I didn't know them. They must have been from the local area because I had seen them before. There was two of them, and they said they were visiting their uncle who was not home, and asked if they could come to my flat to get a drink of water. I agreed. With this, they came to my flat and sat in the living room. I went into the kitchen to get water. Whilst I was doing this, the man was checking my flat to see what he could take. The lady kept me distracted by asking me questions. Eventually they did leave. An hour after, I realised that they had taken my laptop from my bedroom. I knew that I knew what I had to do because I had been listening to Jerry, who was a police officer and a friend of People First Merseyside, and we had done lots of work about crime and hate crime together. I wrote down everything that had happened, including times, what they were wearing, and what they said. The next day, I took it to the police station to report it. I was very shaken by the experience, but I knew I had to do the right thing and report it. The police did an investigation, and again kept in touch with me about what was happening. Unfortunately, there was not enough evidence to get a conviction. The next experience was a targeted attack from the same people who I had been a victim of a couple of months earlier, and I clearly had their faces still in my head. I had just been dropped off from an evening out, and I was walking towards my building where I noticed two familiar faces. They came out of my building and approached me, trying to be friendly. They asked me if I had a couple of pounds to lend them, and I said, no, I still remember that you stole my laptop. They pretended to be surprised by my accusation. Then they turned nasty. Very quickly, the woman grabbed me by the shoulders and pulled me to the ground, and the man went into my pockets to see what he could get. I had a small amount of change in my pocket and my mobile phone, which they took, and they ran off, leaving me on the ground feeling very upset, vulnerable and shocked. I went back to my flat again. I wrote down what had happened and as much detail as I could remember, and then the next day, first thing, I went round to Marsh Lane police station. This time I waited to speak to Jerry, who I knew and trusted. The two people were arrested and taken into custody. I was asked to go to another police station for an identity parade so I could identify the man involved. I was told I had to be sure when I identified the man, and as it was a film, I was not 100% sure or certain. I had to say I was not sure. They got let go, but they were told never to go near me or my home again, and the man was wanted for other crimes and went to jail. As a result of these experiences, I no longer felt safe in my home. Enough was enough. There had been other smaller instances that had added to my anxiety. Jill, who was the housing association, came to visit me. I told all that had happened and asked if I could be moved to somewhere where I would feel safe and secure. As I had been a victim, they agreed to help me move. I now live in my dream destination that is not too far away from all the things that I need. I am surrounded by lovely people, they check on me every day. This has made a massive difference to my life, and it has transformed it, because I now feel safe, especially when I go out in the evening. When I return home, I am no longer frightened that I will be a target. Many years ago, I was witness to my friend David being a victim of hate crime. A woman befriended David and me by faking her identity and pretending to be his girlfriend. She used him and me to get what she wanted, which was money. David was with this person for more than a year before I knew about her. I only knew when he invited her to the flat I shared with him. At the time, he seemed happy. In that time, she used many different tactics to manipulate money out of him. She convinced him to get engaged so she could get money out of him for things like booking holidays, organising engagement parties, buying cake, booking a venue, taking him to the shops and getting him to buy her gifts, paying for taxis, and turned out to be her real which turned out to be her real boyfriend in his car. She also would tell David stories about her family taking him on holiday to Portugal. She told him that she had epilepsy, and this was so my friend would feel sorry for her and make him think she understood him as he had epilepsy too. I was drawn into the hate crime because I supported my best friend. And I also gave her money. I thought I was helping her. It was only when I felt things were not right, I began to be suspicious. Oh, I began to do my.
You began your own investigation.
I began to do my own investigating.
Okay.
She always said, meet us at the bank, and she never turned up. She gave me and David a false address. I actually went there, and the address did not exist. This was when I did something about it. She was renting a property somewhere else with a friend who was also someone who conned people. At this point, my friend, who had always had money and savings, had nothing left. As I had been part of People First Merseyside, and we had talked about hate crime at our Get Involved group meetings, I was more aware of what was happening. I went to People First and talked to the staff and told them I was worried about David and how this person had started asking me for money too. With their help, I reported it to Jerry from Merseyside Police, who was part of the hate crime team and someone we had worked with before. Even at this point, David couldn't see that there was anything wrong, but I knew there was. I knew that Jerry would take what I was telling her seriously, as in the past people didn't believe us. There was an investigation. She was known to the police. People in the local shopping centre were suspicious of her too. We found out that her name wasn't Joanna, it was Leanne. She was a drug addict. She was arrested and jailed for a lengthy period of 17 months. She is now out, but she is being tagged. My friend never really recovered from this. It left him without any savings and unable to trust people. It had a massive impact on his life and mine. It was difficult to speak up and go against David's wishes, but I knew that I had to do the right thing and honest thing and to prevent other people becoming a victim too. It made me more determined. It's made me more determined. Yeah, it has made me more determined to speak up so that other people don't go through what I went through, what we went through. You have to speed up a little bit. Since I have become a member of People First Merseyside 15 years ago, I have been given the opportunity to get involved in many different things. At People First Merseyside, it is important that people with learning disabilities have a voice and gain the confidence to speak up when needed. As part of the work that we do, we talked about hate crime, as I had been a victim and a witness to hate crime. I had a passion in this subject. Thanks to People First Merseyside, people... And Merseyside Police. Yeah, and Merseyside Police. They gave me the opportunity to follow this passion and raise awareness of hate crime to other people with learning disabilities, carers and support staff work across Merseyside. I chair a group called the Get Involved Group, which is a meeting for people with learning disabilities from across Sefton. At these meetings, we raise awareness of disability hate crime. We worked in partnership with Merseyside Police to help people understand what a hate crime is. I have been part of a number of projects to raise awareness of hate crime, as there are many types, and it is important that people with learning disabilities recognise all of them. This is my work. The first project I was part of was called Be Aware, Be Safe, BABS for short. We delivered lots of training across Sefton to groups of people with learning disabilities, talking about the different types of abuse people may face. This included psychological, domestic, physical, emotional, sexual, financial, modern slavery, hate crime, bullying, discrimination. We talked about how hate crime can come from anywhere, including within families. Anyone can be a victim. Anyone can be an abuser. The work I am most proud of is the work I did alongside Jerry McConaughey from Merseyside Police and Paul McCann from Sefton Council, who is part of the hate crime now JAG in Sefton. We work together to raise awareness of hate crime to support staff and providers across Sefton. We talk about what hate crime is, how to recognise the signs if someone is being taken advantage of, and what to do if they witness something they believe to be a hate crime. I also share my stories about my experiences and talk about how they made me feel. I have been doing this for at least 6 years, but it feels like longer. And pleased to say we always get really good feedback, and people I'm especially impressed with my story and how brave I am to share it with them.
We'll skip this page.
Yeah, we can.
Just to say that's lots of the other work that we've done around hate crime.
Yeah.
We're being moved.
Yeah.
We're being hoofed.
So
we're running out of time. Next page.
40, 13.
Your achievements.
All right, so here's my achievements. As a result of my many years doing this work, I am proud to say that I have been nominated and won a number of awards. The first was the Anthony Walker Foundation Award.
Just a second. Just say the names of the
top. The Community First Award and the Sefton for Good Award.
Which you're very proud of.
Which I'm very proud of, yeah. And probably finally, my message to you is, it is important to me that people understand the seriousness of what hate crime is, and for me to pass on my knowledge and experiences to other people with learning disabilities. It is important that people have the confidence to tell someone, this could be family or a friend, know how to report a hate crime, understand what a hate crime is so they understand it is happening to them, understand how to keep themselves safe, and understand who to contact if it happens, like 101 if it is not an emergency, and 999 if it is. I want everyone to understand about hate crime wherever they live, but most of all, I don't want anyone else to become a victim themselves.
Yeah, very, very brave words, Phil, and you've obviously done a lot. You've obviously done a lot to incentivise your community, make hate crime a more aware thing in the community, and I think you should be applauded for your brave work, and thank you also.